So without question, advancements in technologies are pushing ethical boundaries like never before. And because of that, the ICAC is delighted to be able to have with us today and to welcome Jim Collins. Jim Collins is a Watson Applications Strategy Executive, Data and AI for North America at IBM. He works closely with the sales and solutions delivery teams to ensure that IBM's business analytics solutions are best aligned to address enterprise or industry-specific business issues and challenges as expressed by the finance and management executives at IBM's clients. Jim has over 40 years of financial management experience, including holding the positions of CFO and controller. He has a wide background in various industries, including telecom, semiconductors, consumer products, manufacturing, import-export, ethical pharmaceuticals, and electronics. Jim has been in the seats of IBM's customers and prospects and adds valuable insight to best practices and successful processes to aid in the design, implementation, and integration of IBM solutions. So please join me in welcoming Jim Collins.
Thank you, Nancy. That's a great introduction, and I always get a kick out of the 40 years experience when they start talking about 40 years experience. Now it's about 46 or 47. But that being said, I'm a seasoned veteran, and the last 14 years have been with IBM doing exactly what you talked about, talking to customers and clients and prospects. So I'm going to start my presentation, Impact of New Technologies on Ethics from Principles to Practice. But first, I just want to thank the ICAC for inviting me here again. This is the third time that I've spoken to ICAC, and by far, this is one of my favorite conferences, and I mean that sincerely. It's one of the conferences that I attend all the sessions. I mean, because I always learn something from the sessions, which is it's really great for me. I remember back in 2017 when it was in Guyana and we talked about gold and gold exploration, and the gentleman that was speaking said, you know, if you want to find out a little bit more about it, go get that movie Gold. And I did. I mean, I bought it as soon as I got back home. I bought it and looked at it. And you talk about ethics. I mean, that was one of the things that really stood out, where the lack of ethics in that particular process. But this is my ICAC participation. In 2017, I came and I talked about the future of finance and the impact of disruptive technologies. In 2018, I talked about how AI is reshaping the accounting industry. Then, of course, 2020 was postponed. I was invited then again by my friend Khalil, and then in 2021, here I am, Impact of New Technologies on Ethics and going virtual. What's difficult for me, and one of the things that I kind of like to do, is I get feedback from the audience. And when, you know, I think if any of you who were there at 2018, I even had you standing up and doing some things and raising your hand and things like that. So it's a little difficult not to see reactions. And quite frankly, it's a little bit frustrating. But you know, here we are in this new virtual world, and things have changed, and things, you know, have gotten a little different in the way that we do business. What have I been doing? Well, I've been home. Now, usually that would probably get a laugh, but I've been home because this is what is going on in the world. I used to travel 85% of my time, but now I haven't. And it makes it challenging, and it's challenging for everybody, not just from a business standpoint, but relationships. And you know, I work with customers and prospects and clients, and a lot of it is groups. And quite frankly, it's very difficult to have a conversation over a Zoom call or a WebEx or whatever, because you don't see faces. So it's been a challenge. It's been a real challenge. But if I go back to the talk that I did back in 2017, I talked about AI ethics and transparency and trust in the cognitive era. You know, what the purpose was: augmenting human intelligence, transparency, your data is yours, skills, new skills, higher impact. This was back in 2017. Things haven't changed. It's still ethics. It's still the AI ethics. And when I start talking about the technology, and certainly I'm going to be talking about AI, because there's a lot of technology. It's all encompassing within the AI space. And that's going to be very important as we move forward. And this is the end of my presentation back in 2017, the future of finance, takeaways, financial professionals, all these still apply, but you'll see at the bottom, AI ethics, transparency and trust in the cognitive era. Our profession needs to lead and set the example, which was a message earlier on today on, in one of the presentations talking about transparency and trust in the cognitive era. Now, I need you to go get a pencil and a piece of paper because I want you to write this down. My email address is jim.collins@us.ibm.com. You may need this later, and I will tell you why. In order to successfully deploy data science and AI across the enterprise, you must be prepared. I mean, you got to bring technology where your data is. You really, to bring data to technology doesn't necessarily work. You got to bring that technology out there to get to where the data is. Enable speed of development. We talk about speed, agility, those kind of things. Never more important than now, especially when we're trying to react to COVID things and try to react very quickly. Support collaboration across different stakeholders. You've heard me talk about that before, some of you, and I talk about that collaboration. It's very difficult to collaborate on Excel spreadsheets, etc. And then, of course, operationalizing results into actionable insights. And that was funny because the Right Honorable Perry Christie this morning, he talked about actionable insights, and that's what's going to be a key in the tourism industry. And that, he said that was going to be a key in the tourism industry, and that's something we've been talking about for a long time. What we kind of tagged this AI thing is not just artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. Is where man and machine, man and machine come together, and that's something that was tagged by our chairman Ginny Rometty back a couple of years ago when we first started talking about AI and how we're going to do it. But it's augmented intelligence. It's really, you're not going to take people out of the equation, but you're going to get them more involved and be able to help them and do things faster. As I go through these data points, before I get into them, I always talk about definitions. And the nice thing about doing this virtually is I can have notes and I can talk about my notes and things. And there's business ethics definitions that I really want to talk about. And one of the things, business ethics is a form of applied ethics or professional ethics that examines ethical principles and moral or ethical problems that can arise in a business environment. It applies to all aspects of business conduct and is relevant to the conduct of individuals and entire organizations. By definition, business ethics are moral principles that act as guidelines. If you remember, I kind of simplified what analytics was by saying it's a logical analysis of data. The best definition of ethics is a system of moral principles and perceptions about right versus wrong. Pretty simple, about right versus wrong. Now, if we're looking at businesses today, they're really technology driven and technology and innovation. And there's huge competition. And the competition kind of lends itself to cutting corners, maybe making some changes, maybe using some tools that aren't necessarily, and I'm not saying that they're ethically incorrect, but they might just be in the gray area, might be on the borderline. And every day we have innovative products and innovative things that come into the marketplace that allow us to see more and to do more. But realistically, when we start looking at it, they're looking at data mining, and they're looking at invasion of privacy, and they're looking at data theft and workplace monitoring. Those are all common and critical right now to business. So at IBM, and I always talk about IBM in the sense of we do a lot of studies and we have a lot of information and we gather a lot of information in order to make decisions. But 81% of consumers say they became more concerned during the prior year with how companies use their data. And I think that's pretty paramount to everyone that is involved. And 75% are now less likely to trust organizations with their personal information. I know that if all of a sudden I'll get a request for some information or something like that, and I really do some due diligence to try to find out where that request is coming from. There's a lot of phishing that goes on and things of that nature. And when you start looking at those kind of things, that's, maybe some unethical behavior coming through that. 4 out of 5 directors say AI ethics issues are board level responsibility. Well, I don't necessarily agree that they're board level responsibility, but it's board level and the rest of the corporation. And then well over half of executives point to the CTO and CIO as primarily accountable for AI ethics. we firmly believe at IBM that everyone is accountable for business ethics. So in that sense, the disparate views on AI's ethical challenges, it's a lot of people have opinions, and a lot of people have different opinions, and that's kind of what makes the world go round. But businesses focus on organizational implications while consumers are concerned about things that affect them. So it really is, it creates like some fine line within this ethics conversation. Who has, again, like what we do with our financing, who has the right set of numbers and who has the right approach to ethics? As long as everybody's working to the same end, which means truth, then I think we're okay, even with disparate views. There's a CEO disconnect, and I tend to look at that. They have corporate oversight responsibility, and as they get down the chain, they're not looking at it. But I think more and more today, we're seeing more CEOs, CFOs, actually the whole C-suite coming together on AI ethics and understanding that this creation of panels and boards within the company to deal with ethics is becoming a very important part of their business. And then, of course, most board members think they're unprepared to tackle AI ethics or technology ethics and stuff, and that's probably true because of where they come from. So they all have their own little niches that they work with. But this is a very complex thing when you start thinking about technology and technology ethics. So a healthy relationship between man and machine, and this is where we really start to create this handshake agreement, is a purpose. So you want to look at the purpose of the technology, the purpose of what you're trying to create, or what you're trying to get out of this technology, and what you're trying to do with the technology. So the reason for the user to engage with the system. And it changes. It changes as the systems grows, and it changes as people get more acclimated to the systems and understand more. Value. What system provides the user that tangibly improves their life? And we always talk about improving the quality of life with technology. And that's really what it's meant to do. Doing things faster, doing things with more information, making better decisions, etc. I did hear Mr. Christie this morning talk about the actionable insights, and that's ultimately what we talk about. We talk about getting the best information to create actionable insights, and ultimately to create better profitability within the companies, or to create better opportunities or significant opportunities within the company. And then, of course, trust. The willingness of a user to invest in an emotional bond with a system. You have to be able to trust the information. That is so critical. And of these three, trust to me is probably the most important thing, especially when you start talking about ethics. We know this guy. He had a little bit of difficulty. Mark Zuckerberg. I think you're all familiar with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. But what happens when we lose trust? Zuckerberg, he was testifying to Congress about Cambridge Analytica, when they used the Facebook platform to secretly harvest information on 50 million people. 50 million people, but they did it in secret. They didn't do it. It wasn't well publicized. And everybody lost trust. We lost trust in Facebook for a while, and it seemed very difficult to overcome that, to get it back. Once you lose trust, I mean, and I've said that even in personal relationships, if I can't trust you, I can't do business with you. I can't be your friend. So Facebook had a fight, and they try to regain their trust of the users, and it's taken them quite a long time for both the platform and for the users in their industry. And that's something that resonates with a lot of folks. IBM's principles for trust and transparency, these are just keys to successful business relationship. The purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence. That's what we just talked about, augmented intelligence. Data and insights belong to their creator, not to the computer, not to the artificial intelligence, but to the creator. And then new technology, including AI systems, must be transparent and explainable. Now, transparency, that's a word that came out several years ago, several years ago, and I talked about it a lot, just in relation to accounting and finance. And be transparent, have transparency in your numbers, have transparency in these kind of things. It must be transparent and must be explainable. It's like when I used to do math problems in high school, it said, well, show your work. And a lot of times I used to be able to do things in my head. I didn't show my work, and I had the nuns at the time, and they come in, Mr. Collins, show your work. So it has to be explainable. This is key, and this is key to our own, at IBM, our own principles for trust and transparency. We're all accountable. We are all accountable for the technology that we create. So ethical decision making isn't just another form of technical problem solving. It's about doing the right thing. And I think, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I'm talking to a group of accountants or finance folks and everything, because that's what we do. I mean, our whole premise is business ethics. But now from a technological standpoint, we have to be able to investigate where this information is coming from, what it's being used for, and what the ultimate end game is. So we have 5 areas that we look at, 5 focus areas in IBM, where we look at everyday ethics. Everyday ethics is related to technology. And of course, the first one is accountability. Every person is accountable. And I said that earlier. At any step, accountable for considering the system's impact on the world. And it's accountability. We talk about accountability when we're doing our accounting, when we're doing these things. And from time immemorial, it's been, debits and credits, they got to balance. I mean, it's so one thing, but you start taking a look at accountability, and someone is responsible for this work. Someone is responsible for the creation of this work. And we have to make sure that the system's impact on the world is trustworthy. That becomes the key for accountability. Value alignment, that's another story. It should be designed to align with norms and values of your user group in mind. Every user group creates their own, a lot of user groups create their own system of ethics, or their own mantra for ethics, for business ethics, and they have their own norms and values. As long as they're correct, as long as they're honest, and those kind of things, everyone doesn't have to have the same norms and values in their list, and that's fine, as long as they don't conflict with one another. And that's I think what we want to talk about when we talk about value alignment. Then of course there's explainability, and earlier on I had talked about that. It should be easy to perceive, detect, and understand its decision process for humans to understand it. And there are a lot of algorithms. We end up with a lot of algorithms out there that we might not totally understand. Somebody, a data scientist, may understand it, maybe able to explain it. So that kind of fits here, where we're talking about easily perceive, detect, and understand decision process. But it's how does the transparency of your system really affect a person's overall trust in the product? Key. User data rights. It must be designed to protect user data and to preserve the user's control over access and uses. And preserving control, that we say that intentionally. I mean, preserve the user's control. We have the responsibility to empower users. So when we have that responsibility to empower users, to preserve their control over the access and uses is critical. And of course, to protect user data, there's nothing more important than protecting the user data. And then the fifth point is fairness. AI must be designed to minimize bias and promote inclusive representation. I can't tell you how much time and how many thousands and thousands and thousands of hours and people have been dedicated to minimizing bias and examining bias within our organization, within IBM. Whose voices do you listen to when you're talking about bias? Look around the room. I say that, look around the room. I used to say look around the room, but look around you and look around at your colleagues and the things, the demographics. There's multiple demographics, and it's all reflected in what we create. So you want to make sure that you educate yourself on intentional and unintentional bias that creep into your work. it happens, but it can be mitigated and it can be avoided. Ethical decision-making starts at the very beginning of the AI creation process, or at the technology process. The creation of technology, right at the very beginning, you have to start making ethical decisions. There's no question about that. When you lay out the models, or when you lay out as that old finance term that I've used many times when I'm talking to the ICAC, is you're talking about the gazintas. You know, the gazintas. This goes into that, this goes into that, this goes into that when you're starting to make ethical decisions. Now, one thing I miss is I used to get a laugh when I would say the gazintas, because everybody would get a kick out of it, just like when I would talk about the suspense account. I would get a laugh. I don't know if I'm getting a laugh or not, but hopefully I'm getting a laugh. And, you know, the gazintas are something, although it's not really a highly technical term, it has great meaning when you're starting to take a look at ethical decision making in the beginning. I do a lot. I mean, I don't like to, but I do show statistics, and there's a lot of statistics that we end up getting as a result of the IBM surveys that we put together. You know, we talked to 1,250 executives or 1,500 executives, and talking about what's happening in their own organizations, and almost all of the executives say their own organizations are ethical. They say they're ethical. But there's widespread concern that AI could have serious repercussions if improperly unleashed. So the organization is ethical, but the technology that we're bringing in and the things that we're bringing in may lend themselves to the possibility for making unethical decisions. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm not saying that they are. But the opportunity is there. Now, I know that we know that there are things that happen out there, and there are unethical decisions that are made. But 55% of the executives that we talked to said AI, or the new technology, could improve their company's ethical decision making, and only 9% were concerned about a negative impact. So that's pretty good. And if you're looking at 9% said there's a negative impact. Perhaps if you delved a little further into that, you might find that they had an experience that was a little bit below their standards. The level, here's something that I really kind of glean out of how long we've been in business. I mean, how long accounting and how long accounting standards, et cetera, have been around. The level of cognitive understanding between humans and machines is inherently lower than it is between humans and other humans. So, cognitive understanding between humans and machines, it's lower, the understanding, than it is human to human. Yet the latter, the human to human, has been structured for centuries around ethics. So the human to human relationships that we have really are ethically based. Not so much with humans and machines. And that's partially because it's so new, and we have to figure out how to improve that relationship. AI relies on huge computing power, and it derives insight from so much data. So, as I've always said, there's so much data today than there ever was before, and tomorrow there's going to be more. So relying on traditional ethical approaches isn't necessarily going to cut it. It might not be sufficient, when we're addressing all the AI-powered decisions that we have. If we look at the AI ethics definition, or the technology ethics definition, AI ethics, and of course we'd have to pare this down a bit, but AI ethics is a multidisciplinary field of study in which the main goal is to understand how to optimize AI's beneficial impact while reducing risks and adverse outcomes for all stakeholders. It prioritizes human agency and well-being, as well as environmental flourishing. You can read all these. To this really goes to say, the data responsibility issues lie in privacy, fairness, inclusion, moral agency, value alignment, accountability, transparency, trust, and technology misuse. I'm sure that if we sat down and we went at the table, there'd be other issues that we could start talking about, examples of these issues. But when you look at, the 5 points that I mentioned earlier, fairness and value alignment, accountability, trust, etc., and technology misuse, these are things that lend themselves to non-ethical behavior. And those are the things that we really have to keep check on. What's the most important in ethically harnessing the power of AI? Who's responsible? Who's responsible to help ensure that ethics are integrated? How can society best use AI for good? Well, across the board, AI has become essential, must discuss technology. We know that. More than 2/3 of the executives surveyed view AI ethics as an important business topic, at least to a moderate extent. I think it's much more than a moderate extent. Among executives whose organizations are currently engaging with AI, the percentage is almost 90% that have adopted or that are concerned with ethics. And nearly all say they're formally considering ethics as part of their AI initiatives, at least to a moderate extent. But 90% say this is top of mind, AI ethics and technology ethics. And that's all the executives, and it goes across the entire organization. To go back to who's responsible for helping ensure that ethics are integrated into AI? Everyone. Executives rank data responsibility and as one of the big important factors, value alignment, algorithmic accountability. But 40% of the executives view various concerns about data as a barrier to AI adoption, and only half have a high degree of confidence in their business data. I talk to a lot of executives in my job, and I ask them about their data. I ask them about their information, and how confident are you that your information is accurate and your information is correct? And the response almost all the time is, it's the best information I have available today. Yeah, but okay, how do you trust it? And the line is, it's the best information I have available today. Now, the old line that we used to use is you surround yourself with good people so that you're getting the best information and you're getting good information, etc. And that's fine. But to say that it's the best information available I have today, is there better information available? There could be. And the answer is yes, there is a possibility that there is. So I want to be able to increase that confidence in their business data. What does that? Technology, and the use of technology and the use of ethics within that technology. Consumers are increasingly concerned about what personal data companies are using and how they use it. We know that. I mean, I know that. I think personally, we're all concerned about that they're getting my information. What are they doing with it? I don't want my information to go out there. Even on some computer games now, it says, do you want to share your information with the modeler of this computer game? No, I don't. But 61% of the respondents that we said strongly agree with the fact that the technology industry needs to be more transparent about how its products work. So tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're going to do with the information. Tell me where it's going in an honest and ethical manner. Becoming more concerned about companies' use of personal data in the past year, 50%. 75% of the consumers said that in the past year, they become less likely to trust organizations with their personal data. And that's just a result of seeing some of the things that have happened. And it's like when I talk about security, and I talk about security of information, and I talk about security with IBM, within IBM. We have the best security that's available today. We're IBM. We have the best security that's available today. We have people working on it constantly. And tomorrow, we're going to have the best security that's available tomorrow. However, that doesn't mean that there's not somebody down in a basement somewhere trying to hack into your information. They're trying. How fast we recover, how fast we block it, and those kind of things are the things that are in security. But there's always somebody out there that's going to get into something, and you see a breach. So there's breaches that happen. It's how fast we recover that becomes the issue and becomes the part of agility that really resonates when we start talking about security. So there are those folks out there, and just like in security breaches, that will that will work in an unethical manner because it gives them competitive advantage. We just have to watch out for those folks. So AI will have a tremendous impact on workers and skills. We know that. It's not going to eliminate workers. And I've said that. I said that the last time I spoke here. People are going to have to learn different things. You know, the impact on jobs, there's certainly an impact on jobs because of not so much on ethical considerations as this says, but because they're going to have to learn more skills. So, and I think we heard that earlier in one of the presentations where we were talking about the skills of workers has to be changed. More than 120 million workers in the world's 12 largest economies may need to be retrained or reskilled in the next 3 years. But that's okay. I mean, you know, now me, I'm I'm old, but you know, you say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can. And there's certain things that, you know, I've learned along the way that really have become beneficial to me as I, you know, move into my twilight years or the twilight of my career. But, you know, I'm accepted. I accept being retrained. I accept learning new things. And I think most of the folks that are out there in the business world will do that. Executives expect that advancements in AI and automation technology will require roles and skills that don't exist today. You know, we may change some titles, like a data scientist. I talked to some data scientists, and they say, "Well, I'm really an analyst." You know, yeah, but I have the title data scientist. I said, "Okay, well, you're an analyst, but things have changed." Oh yeah, things have changed. I mean, the data that I'm looking at, how I look at it, where I get it from, and those kind of things, that's changed a lot, and that's going to continue as we move forward. The percentage of the workforce that's going to need retraining is pretty high. You know, as we talk about the skills and the investments that's going to be required by the businesses, but that's going to be critical to competitive advantage. If they don't do anything, it's just like going into AI. If you don't go into AI, you know that your competition is. So there's things that you have to take a look at. Data responsibility. There's a few examples that I like to talk about, and quite frankly, I use my notes for this because they're important. You know, they're risk areas. The risk area is data responsibility, including data ownership. Storage, use, and sharing of data are very important to the business, but is very important to the ethical portion of the business. It's influenced by a stream of examples of data breaches and misuse that have punctuated the news. So 40% of as we said before, 40% of the executives don't trust their data, and they don't have a high degree of trust. The second piece is of AI ethics that folks have trouble with, of course, is the value alignment, and that's the AI algorithms. You know, they're not as transparent. They're not as transparent as we would think. I mean, I take a look at algorithmic accountability, and you know, there are folks that are going to get reskilled, and they can take a look at algorithmic accountability. It's not going to be me, but I certainly can lead that, and that's the expectations that we have within the business. So there are AI-enabled systems that take a look at actions and decisions, and that really point them out and drive you in the right direction. And from an ethical standpoint, you know, we have in the U.S. we have generally accepted accounting principles, and we all have the same type of thing. And those are the things that we really have to take a look at and make sure that they're ethically balanced. There's a few examples. Here's in one study assessing AI's accuracy in identifying cancerous lesions. And this is where, you know, the imperfect results might give you unintended consequences. So they identified cancerous lesions. So researchers noted that the AI system tended to flag photographs of lesions with rulers or other visible indications of measurements. Dermatologists often use such tools if they suspect malignancy after an initial assessment. The AI agent learned that lesions with these tools in the picture, with a ruler in the picture, were more likely to be cancerous, but without any understanding why. That's a little bit scary, but that's what the AI piece was showing. A similar issue arose in assessing AI's ability to predict pneumonia from radiographs. The AI agent associated a higher probability of illness with specialist hospital locations that admitted sicker patients. Let me repeat that. The AI agent associated a higher probability of illness with specialist hospital locations that admitted sicker patients. It anchored on the correlation without identifying or even looking for an underlying root cause. So that's a little scary. So we're still important. Humans are still very important. Another real world and well-known example is where Amazon shelved an AI-powered recruiting engine that appeared to be inclined against selecting women. It was inclined against selecting women. This made a lot of press because industry hiring practice from the last decade had resulted in an employee pool dominated by men. The AI algorithms learned from historical data that conforming to successful hiring practices from the male-dominated past meant screening out resumes with activities such as women's field hockey team captain. Now that's pretty scary. And that's why human intervention is never going to go away. Amazon's not alone. These issues have risen in law enforcement, customer interactions, translation, image interpretation, etc. And the value of the problem, when AI misunderstands what it's supposed to do, it's often closely followed by questions of who's responsible and accountable for the algorithm. Ensuring that AI does what it is meant to do and can explain why it did so is critical. So here we get to the transparency and the explainability issues. I talked a little bit about the interesting investing in skills and including that in the process. When it comes to AI ethics in the private sector, a critical role can be played by the board of directors, absolutely, because they want to make sure that the business is looking at these issues and making sure that the business ethics from all the way down to the bottom level of the organization pushes down, making sure that the organization understands that you'll have a mission statement or a statement like that which deals with ethics and deals with AI ethics or deals with technology ethics and should be important. Only 45% of the directors said that they're fully prepared to tackle these issues. We talked about that before because they're not familiar with them. So education is also a key when it comes to the process within the board. CEOs seem to be out of step with their boards. Now, out of step, I think they're viewing AI ethics as a CEO level issue, whereas not necessarily a board issue. It really is it's a collaborative thing. Technology ethics is a collaborative thing. We have to go through the entire organization. It's just like when we say, analytics is not just for finance. Now we like to think it's because there's numbers associated, it's for finance, but it's not. It's across the entire enterprise. The collaboration across the enterprise is key. Being able to give the information to the entire enterprise is key. And CEOs that are out of step with their executive teams should get in step with their executive teams. And that, to me, the collaboration that you have with the C-suite, is absolutely critical for success. Executives expect that multiple entities outside of their organization will greatly influence AI ethics. Well, certainly, the technology is coming from the outside. Well, technology firms, we're one of them. We try to inform and make sure that we inform correctly and adequately so that businesses can make decisions about ethics as they go forward. It's one of those things that, governments certainly are going to come up with regulations. Customers are going to come up with their own, how they do business or how they're going to go about doing business. And of course, other companies are going to influence it as well, we would hope. But technology firms like us, we're out there in the forefront trying to talk about ethics in business and trying to talk about ethics within AI and bias and those kind of things, which is all very important. But it's the more we talk about it, the more we get it out in the forefront, the more we get people thinking about it, and the more transparent we become, the better off we're all going to be. The insight. So now we have an AI ethics definition, and I talked about it a little bit that before AI ethics, multidisciplinary field of study in which the main goal is to understand how to optimize AI's beneficial impact. It's really just being able to work with trust and transparency and know that folks are doing the next right thing within their customers. From an IBM standpoint, what steps might be considered in response to the proliferation of AI, the corporate ambiguities and the disconnects? AI ethics need to be embedded into existing corporate mechanisms from the top down, from the board of directors to the CEO's office to the C-suite down to the operational level. Unethical behavior and unethical technology usages are not acceptable. They're just not acceptable. So within business conduct guidelines, I know that we at IBM have that as part of our business conduct guidelines that we have to sign every year. Values and statements, employee training, ethics advisory boards. If companies don't have an ethics advisory board, I strongly recommend that you get an ethics advisory board, even if it's 2 people, just to be able to examine what's going on. And those kind of things will help internalizing AI ethics throughout the entire corporation. Monday morning corporate playbook, here's what we look at. The boards ensure CEO and C-level are fully aware and engaged in AI ethics issues. Establish internal AI ethics board. Establish internal AI ethics board to provide governance, etc. The human resources, assess AI impact on skills and workforce, which we have to certainly work to create more skilled workforce, and then take ownership of the outcomes. Technical executives, make sure that you embed ethics governance in everything that you do. And of course, legal, ensure the AI ethics is incorporated in mechanisms for institutionalizing value. There's no question that those are the routes to success. Educate from the ground up, set guidelines and standards, create a unified approach, and forge a sustainable future. These are 4 steps that you can take within your organization to make sure that you're abiding by this AI ethics practice. With that, I am finished with my part of the presentation. Certainly, we said that we would take some questions, and I'm happy to answer any. But of course, with jim.collins at ibm.com, at us.ibm.com, you can always reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have as we go forward. And certainly I would love to be able to come back and talk to you folks at ICAC, because as I said, it's my favorite conference. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Jim, thank you for sharing your wisdom around AI, ethics, trust and trustworthiness, value alignment, and accountability. Personally, I especially liked your comment. As long as we're all working towards the same end, which is truth, then we should be okay. That really resonated. And also on behalf of the ICAC, thank you for your ongoing support of the profession. I had no idea how much you have been giving back to the profession here in the Caribbean. And on behalf of the entire ICAC, thank you so much.